If you've been sitting a lot, the glutes and other muscles surrounding the hip can become deconditioned simply because you're not challenging them very often. In my last video, I talked about what the glutes do and why it's important to train them. So make sure to click the link below if you want a more in-depth explanation. The butt busters can be a great low impact way to kickstart this process. This series of exercises will help you build some general awareness of the muscles around your hips and get those glutes up to speed as you progress into more complex, high impact exercise routine. All right, so the first exercise we're gonna go over is the clamshell. This is a great exercise that works on the lateral portion of that glute, including the glute medius, which plays a major role in stabilizing that knee joint when you move. All right, so all of the butt busters are gonna be on your side in this position. So this is the clamshell. It's a very simple exercise, and all you're doing is we're just opening that leg like you're opening and closing a clamshell. The setup is important though, and one thing that helps is you're going to take this top hand and you're going to press that palm into the ground. If you actively press in, you'll start to feel these muscles in your core naturally engaged to help stabilize while you press. All right, so that's a good thing. I want you to think of this like a full body exercise, right? When you press into the ground, you kind of build up that full body tension. And what that does is it keeps your hips stacked. When you're pulling that knee up, you want to make sure that that hip doesn't open up, right? You want to make sure the hip stays stacked, one hip over the other. So what this makes sure of is that you're isolating the glute muscle and you're not cheating for more range of motion through your lower back muscles by twisting. A third thing I want you to think of is angle. So I don't want your feet to be way up here or way behind you. I want it to be a nice natural angle, heels in line with the butt, about 45 degrees. And then when you start doing that movement, it's a little more of a natural movement as you pull that knee up. The next exercise is the abducted reverse clamshell. All right, and like the name says, it's essentially the opposite of the clamshell. While the clamshell worked on external rotation of that hip joint, this exercise works on internal rotation of the hip joint and works on the medial portion of those glutes. Right? This is an often restricted range of motion in a lot of people, and it's often the gateway to a comfortable and deep squat position. All right, so the setup is very similar to the clamshell, right? It's just the reverse of it. So you're gonna get into that same position. An important thing to consider with this exercise is that you don't want that top knee to move up and down while you do this exercise, meaning you want to lock it in place and stabilize that knee joint. So what I mean by that is as you do this, I see a lot of times people are moving their knee up and down, right? And they're not really getting much rotation in the hip. This requires you to keep your core stabilized and make sure that knee stays in the same place. And you can do that by looking at your knee to make sure it doesn't move up and down. You want to limit that range of motion, and we're just working strictly on internal rotation of that hip joint. The second key is that top hip. As opposed to the clamshell where your hips want to fall back, this exercise, your hips are going to want to move forward. All right, especially if you lack range of motion. Right? You're going to want to cheat for range of motion by moving forward. Like the clamshell, it's all about keeping your hips stacked. Right? So make sure, once again, you're keeping your core braced so that you're keeping everything basically locked in place when performing this movement. So this exercise in particular is a little less intuitive compared to the other exercises, and a great way to help with this is to place a foam roller or a yoga block between your knees. All right, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna place that foam roller or yoga block between your knees. You're going to gently squeeze to lock that knee in place, keep your core braced, and then you're going to perform the movement this way. And I recommend starting here before you progress to no foam roller until you start to get more awareness and strength through that hip. The third exercise for the Butt Buster series is the side lying leg raise, which targets the muscles in the hip that cause abduction, which is basically the movement of the leg away from the midline of your body. Strengthening these muscles is important for producing and stabilizing lateral movements. All right, so let's get right into it. Step one is making sure that hip is stacked. The second step is you're going to take this top leg and I'm going to kick back right as far as I can while bracing my core until I feel a squeeze in my butt muscle. All right, and that lets you know that you're at full hip extension. From there, you're going to basically just raise your leg to the side while maintaining that hip extension through that hip. Right, so this one, even though it looks easy, it looks simple, a lot of people will have a tendency to allow their hip to go into hip flexion while they raise their leg. So instead of kicking back, their default pattern is to allow their hips to break and raise their leg like that. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, except you're now targeting a different muscle, which is a muscle called a TFL. For our purposes, we want to target the glutes with the butt busters. So in order to do that the most effectively, make sure you brace your core, you extend that hip all the way, squeeze your butt, and then we're just doing a small movement to the side. We're not trying to compete for who gets the highest. It's more about trying to get that activation through the glute. That was the butt busters. As kind of a wrap up, I'm just going to mention 3 tips that are pretty consistent throughout each one of those exercises. All right, so number 1 is brace your core. Number 2 is keep your hips stacked. And number 3 is be patient. All right, this isn't a race to the finish line. We're trying to build awareness of the glutes. So make sure you go slow and make sure you're connecting your brain to the muscle that you're trying to train. All right, so real quick, let's go over some instructions so that you get the maximum burn out of the butt busters. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna pick a side and you're gonna do each exercise in a row on one side before switching to the other side. In this case, I'm gonna start with the clamshells and I'm gonna go for about 30 to 60 seconds. Let's choose 30. When I'm done with 30 seconds, I'm going to immediately just position myself and get into abducted reverse clamshells. And when I'm done, I'm going to straighten that leg and I'm going to go straight into my side lying leg raises. By the time you're finished with this exercise, your glute should be fired up, should be pretty fatigued. Go ahead and shake it off, right? Switch sides and just repeat that same process on the other side. So 30 to 60 seconds per exercise. I suggest starting with 30 seconds and maybe progressing 5 to 10 seconds each week or whatever your comfort level is. All right, so that's the butt busters, right? Let's wrap it up with a conclusion. As a conclusion, I wanted to share some thoughts on how the butt busters fit into the bigger picture. Aside from targeting your glutes, why would you spend 3 to 6 minutes on these exercises when you can spend that time doing a set of squats or deadlifts, which also target the glutes? That's a fair question. It's important to note that these exercises by themselves will not get you in shape. Even though they burn like hell, they don't burn that many calories and they're not effective in the long run in terms of building muscle. That being said, the main benefit of exercises like the butt busters can really be summed up in one word. That's awareness. Let's take the squat as one example. A full body exercise like the squat requires coordination and skill with a lot of moving pieces. Exercises like the butt busters can be very helpful in this scenario because they elevate awareness of the glutes. Ultimately, they're activation tools that can improve quality of movement if you're intentional about it. So when you perform the butt buster, the intention is to activate your glutes and, more importantly, feel them working. Once you get that mind-muscle connection, it's important to apply that knowledge and learn how to use your glutes when performing more complex multi-joint movement patterns like the squat. Just remember, the key word is intention. Awareness by itself is not enough, right? You have to learn how to use your glutes when you perform a movement. Only doing the butt busters by themselves is kind of like reading an informative book, but never actually attempting to apply that information in real life situations. I hope this video helped out. If you enjoyed this video and felt like you learned something, comment below and remember to hit that subscribe button so you get updates on all my latest videos. If you stuck around, I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you next time.